zoning district requirements. Right-of-way is adequate. The application indicates city vision addition, and so it may be appropriate prior to final plat approval by the city commission to rename just either Sandhills 4th or 5th to correspond with other subdivisions in the area. Notices were sent to property owners within 150 feet. Applicable agencies and departments did receive a phone call asking for additional information, and comments were made by the engineering department regarding a few typos on the plat. It is recommended the city commission approve the proposed application on the basis it is consistent with city plans and ordinances, with the recommended conditions of approval as listed in the staff report, with the exception of number 4, a signed subdivision agreement is received as not a requirement. The other conditions: updated drainage plan, attorney title opinion, signed final plat with necessary easements, and certificate of taxes being current are the conditions for approval.
All right, thank you, Lisa. This is a public hearing. With that, I'd like to open it up to any comments from the public.
We do not have anyone indicating a desire to speak right now.
Well, we'll give it a little bit longer. Is there any comments from the public? Any comments from the public? All right, seeing none, we'll close that portion of the hearing. Commissioners.
Seems pretty cut and dry. Then I'll move to approve with the 4 recommendations.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to approve the application with the 4 recommendations. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passed. Item number 4 is a public hearing. It's A20-18. It's a conditional use permit for construction of an accessory building on an agriculturally zoned parcel at 3605 2nd Street East, which is an unplatted parcel located in the southwest quarter section, 29, Township 139 North, Range 49 West, City of West Fargo. Eberhardt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Application here was received to accommodate an amendment to an approved conditional use permit for a non-farm residential use in an agricultural district. When we have some issues like this where the city annexed a property in and we accept it as a conditional use, that's what's written in our ordinance. When there's major improvements to it, if it's a deck or something like that, we wouldn't do it. But if it's a major improvement such as an accessory structure or an addition, we require an amended conditional use. Property here is within city limits. However, it's kind of sandwiched between 2 sections of properties that have not yet been annexed. The area here has consistently been considered residential property in past plans. 2nd Street East is not improved necessarily in front of it. It's a kind of rural section, gravel roadway. There's no right of way on it other than whatever would have been statutorily assigned back in the day when it was improved. However, they provided on the site plan a standard 70-foot right-of-way. A local road would typically be 62 feet. I could see us wanting 70 feet or maybe slightly more to accommodate trails. Not something we've looked at yet, however, but they've done that to kind of provide just a context for the site plan. The property itself has quite a large area, over 1.5 acres. The proposed accessory structure is only an 840 square foot footprint. However, it's 2 floors, so the gross floor area is larger than we would typically approve in a residential district. That could be sort of moot if they were to continue to be zoned agricultural. No issue with that. There is no proposed rezoning anywhere near there. However, I did kind of add some narrative in the staff report that if it were to be rezoned residential, with our current district standards, it may have some issues as being a legal nonconformity. There has been discussion both in our comp plan and within revisions to our ordinances that we may allow for accessory dwelling units in accessory structures. I think if we were to do that, we may increase height requirements, we may increase size requirements, but that's not done yet. It's sort of just something I think is worth memorializing, either both in our staff report and our conditional use permit that we would require them to sign. However, that's up to question in what we have as our recommended conditions. I think it certainly fits the area, has adequate setback. I have no major concerns. I just wanted to note that. With that, I'm available for any questions, and I know both Don Dabbert and Sam Caven from Dabbert Custom Homes are available, as is Jeff Everhart, who is the owner of the property. And when you open the public hearing, I'm just going to open up the site plan so you can kind of talk through that if you have any questions or comments on it. With that, I'm available for any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. I do have some questions, but I think they'll come up, so I'll just leave it alone for now. But this is a public hearing. Are there any comments from the public? Are there any comments from the public? Any comments from the public?
Yes, we have Don Dabbert has raised their hand, so I will invite them to speak now.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you for taking the time. We're getting a little bit more accustomed to doing some of these meetings by media like this. So basically, we wanted to just touch briefly on what we did here to lay this out, keeping this as an ag lot or the 1.6 acres type thing. And this will be still used as for some general yard equipment and other things of that nature too. But we did try to at least set it up, as Tim mentioned, with some adequate setbacks and still keeping in, as if this were zoned, other than a height restriction that he points out in the staff report. We feel that this is pretty well in line with everything that we would have under normal operating procedures.
Thank you, Don. Were there any other comments from the public?
I do not have any other indication of public wanting to comment.
Okay. So seeing none, we'll close that portion of the hearing for now anyway. Commissioners, and if you don't mind, I'll just start. The height is my only concern on this. I know there's always been this question about height of accessory building, no matter where they're at within the city limits. And I know, Tim, you mentioned that you might be suggesting that we change some of that, but correct me if I'm wrong, but from an overall elevation, the picture I see makes it appear as though this garage is taller than the house. Is that true?
Yes, I'm going to find that picture for you. If I can get there. And that isn't, the house is, there's nothing in our height that says it can't be higher than the primary structure. It will look different than it is, but there's nothing that says it can't be. So yeah, here's the elevation that you would have probably been referring to.
Yep, that's the one I see. What is the height restriction component today? Isn't it? I don't remember what it is. I've been through this. I just don't remember what it is.
Yeah, so in the ag district, there is no height limitation. In a rural estate, rural residential, it's 1 second. 20 feet, and that's at midpoint. In a R1A, like a typical neighborhood residential, like within town, it's 15 feet.
So when you say midpoint, that's not the peak number, that's halfway up the ridge?
Yeah, between the eve and the peak.
So this one is 20?
This one is measured at 20.5 at midpoint.
Oh, I don't know that I have a fight over 6 inches then. That was the only thing that I saw that I even had a question on.
Mr. Chairman, for what it's worth, too, just as a representation, there is quite a bit of undulation to this lot. This would not be a true real life representation of what if the house would be at baseline 100, meaning the garage floor at 100. This garage floor would probably be closer to 97. It'd be about 3 feet ish lower from slab to slab, just by the way the house is built up. And we're going to try to keep this as close to the existing grade and elevation of where it's at, so you don't end up creating any other retaining walls in the back of the lot. So it wasn't meant to be as a true representation as if this were a urbanized street.
Okay.
I have a question, or just kind of wondering or walking through this. Is it a 3.5 foot difference, Tim, between what the residential height is and this? Did you say 20 feet versus 23.5? Or did I mishear you?
The current measurement of what they're proposing is 20.5 at midpoint.
Oh, the proposed is 20.5.
And if it were a rural estate or a rural residential district, so you'd think like McMahon Estates or Nelson Acres, these are a few rural subdivisions kind of in the south end of town, their midpoint height requirement would be 20 feet. If it were in a typical residential neighborhood, it would be 15 feet at midpoint.
15.
Yep.
So at issue might be the precedents that's set as time goes on, and there might be plating and potential rezoning in this area and other residential plans. And then if we've allowed this, we would perhaps feel compelled to allow this with others. Is that one of the drawbacks here? I'm trying to figure out pros and cons of doing this. Is that a con?
Precedents, not necessarily, because it's zoned agricultural. It doesn't meet, like if we were looking at a rural residential or rural estate conditional use permit, I would say absolutely we wouldn't want to budge on the rules. It being agricultural, there are no height requirements, so I'm not concerned so much with precedents on this. Our attorney may want to weigh in on that if we're going to be reviewing a lot of these. And if we are really thinking that they're going to transition someday into a different type of district, and we don't want to ever create a nonconformity, that would be an issue. But we're still going to have another process before us. So if they came in here and say this were approved and they built it, and then they came in and said, no, we want to rezone to residential, we would clearly have the ability to say that, well, you can do that, but you have a nonconformity. You either need to deal with that nonconformity and reduce the height, or you need to accept that it's going to be a legal nonconforming structure. Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, if I could kind of lean on our attorney a little bit and have him weigh in on that question.
Sure, that's fine. But I think, and I would like him to address this question though, because a legal non-conforming does not harm the people who own it at that time. It's the people who want to buy it next that creates the problem, right?
Yeah, or if it is destroyed beyond 50%.
Okay.
To fire.
Yeah, that's correct. I think Tim summed it up correctly, and Mr. Chair, you also summed it up. It doesn't necessarily hurt the current owners. If it becomes a legal non-conforming use, sometimes that raises issues with their mortgage company. and it may make it difficult to resell it if it's a legal non-conforming use, especially in a residential area. You'll recall, I think probably 6 months ago, we rezoned a number of houses because they were having that same issue. They were bordering a commercial area and a residential area, and they were having problems with financing for those homes. So same issue. From a precedent standpoint, I'm not concerned from a legal standpoint. Obviously, there would be a policy precedent, but not from a legal standpoint.
But the current zoning is agricultural. So this is in no way outside of the limitations for that, which it currently is zoned.
That's correct.
Well, I think that if the applicant understands the, well, I don't know if I want to call it risk, but if the applicant understands the process, and if this ever does get changed, there is that potential issue there with resale, and they're willing to accept that risk, there really isn't anything that I can see that would cause us to say no.
It might be worth, John's helped us on our conditional use permit to provide an acknowledgement of that, which we then record against the property. So when they do their due diligence on purchasing the property, if they're selling it, they'll know that. I mean, I could, simply say, if you drop half a foot off of this, you're going to be in better shape. If it were to be rezoned to a R1E or R1 or RR, actually it couldn't be RR. Potentially somebody could rezone an area here to R1E. It's not likely, but.
Yep. Yeah, it really isn't likely. The rest of the land around there doesn't really have the depth of the property to do much with it. So.
No, they'd really be better off just keeping it zoned ag,
exactly.
And not messing with it for a long time. But
so, and that's my point too. It's just one of those points of caution that if it ever does happen, just beware.
Yeah. And that's excuse me for kind of talking out of order, Mr. Chair, but I think that's probably one of those kind of balances of telling what people can do with their property versus are they really harming anybody, and that's certainly an instance here where I think as long as we provide that acknowledgement, we've learned some lessons over the past to make sure we do that. I would, again, maybe ask again that our attorney weigh in, but if that acknowledgement is sufficient enough, I would feel comfortable upholding my recommendation for approval.
Yeah, we can certainly draft that into the conditional use permit, and that would protect the city.
Commissioners?
Just a, I don't know, maybe it's not a relevant question, but a two-story garage, it's possible somebody could put a living space up there and move their child into it, or a elderly parent, or rent it out as an apartment. I mean, how is that regulated?
So we actually define family in our zoning ordinance. So there are certain areas where it's single family, and the ag district allows for non-farm single family dwellings. So the city could regulate them from being able to rent it. They could have their family members in there, which I think is a great idea. But we do regulate family dwelling units. So we do have certain areas of town that allow for 1 and 2 family dwellings. So you can rent out, turn your house into a duplex, something like that. This wouldn't only allow for a single family. Complicated to enforce, but it is enforceable.
Yeah, I'm just curious because I'm seeing some of that kind of stuff out in the country and not knowing how to zone that.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, this is Eric Dodds. Tim, maybe a question for you on the staff report. The first, under the discussion and observations on page 1 of the staff report, the first bullet explains that this area has not yet been annexed. But then in the second bullet point, it says, although the property has been annexed, it has never been platted. I'm assuming that's just a typo and this is not annexed, but wanted to clarify.
Yeah, so the clarification is there that the parcels to the north and south have not yet been annexed. This parcel is annexed. Sandwich in kind of this parcel and the parcel across the street from it are within city limits. But the area to the north and the area to the south are not. And that's why second is unimproved.
Thank you.
Jeff, any history on why you are annexed and nobody else is? Maybe Dustin has that history, or John.
You're annexed and Goldbergs are.
No, I think I started with you a while ago, Tim. I guess I question why we have not been as well. So I guess I'm kind of
I can shed some light on it.
clueless too. Yeah, Don might know more.
It does go back to, and Mr. Scott would be able to weigh in on this as well, but it goes back to nearly 15 years ago. It'll be 15 years in October when I made the first purchase from the Lobergs, and part of the annexation agreement is that they would have a 15-year abatement essentially from being annexed. And so as of this date, that you step across one property line and you are in the county, and you step across the other property line and you're in the city of West Fargo, and that is still that way today. And the Lobergs and the Holcombs for the foreseeable future would still like to very much stay that way. So as a process of when Jeff's property changing hands was brought in by kind of an umbilical, I think Mr. Shockley had something in Brian at that time of how when we did the other part of Holcombs where that was touching it, we could annex part of that in. But yeah, it's crazy to think it's been 15 years already since this kind of was all having these discussions.
Yeah, this property will become part of the city in December. The administrative law judge order was on December 8th of 2005. And that gave a 15-year period under which it would stay out of the city. And so this parcel will be coming into the city in pretty short order. The commission passed a confirming resolution. Actually, no action was needed, but they just confirmed that the 15 years was anticipated to pass. And therefore, at the end of this year, it will be in the city of West Fargo. And I am amazed that 15 years has passed, because I recall driving through all of these areas with houses and it being dusty farm roads, working on the annexation issue.
So annexing it into the city does not necessarily mean that it's zoned though, right? It just is ag land inside the city?
Correct.
Got it.
So the surrounding land will develop when it's ready to develop, and our plans have nothing more than residential along that because it's so surrounded by other residential. And 2nd Street doesn't extend north of 32nd and south of 40th. It's just more residential. So
yeah, it's kind of a farm road within the city.
Yeah.
All right, I'd accept the motion.
This is
I
Dodd.
move to approve. Sorry.
Go for it.
Okay. I would move to approve with the recommendations of staff, adding the condition of an acknowledgement as well.
This is Dodds. I'll second that motion.
All right, it's been moved by April and seconded by Eric to approve the application with the 2 recommendations plus a 3rd recommendation that we place an acknowledgement on the property that there is that it is potentially non-conforming for certain zoning districts. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Motion passed. All right. Item number 5 is continued. It's A20-10, a conditional use permit for an off-premise signage within the DMU Downtown Mixed Use District at 444 Cheyenne Street, Lot 2, Block 1 of Cheyenne Plaza, First Edition, City of West Fargo, Fargo, North Dakota, West Fargo events.
So if you recall, this application was received in order to allow for off-premise advertising on the existing electronic message center and to provide for an off-premise sign that denotes sponsorship by Choice Bank of the POW MIA Plaza. At the last meeting, this was tabled to allow for more information from the applicant outlining the use of the video board for off-premise advertising. The applicant submitted a letter outlining the use of the video board. The letter states, the City of West Fargo has contracted with the West Fargo Events to provide management, programming, and maintenance services on the City of West Fargo's POW MIA Plaza. The intention for the conditional use permit application submitted by West Fargo Events is to permit the video board as an off-premise sign consistent with the downtown mixed-use zoning district. The screen hours of operation can be adjusted as needed for city ordinance. Our current arrangement is 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. to minimize the impact it has on the neighborhood. At the time of the packet presentation, the applicant was reworking the details on the placement of the Choice Bank sponsorship sign. We sent that out as a separate email to commissioners. Again, it's under staff recommendations at our last meeting. If it is found through deliberation by the commission that the proposal will not generate a nuisance to adjacent properties and the general public, it is recommended that the city approve the proposed application on the basis it is consistent with city plans and ordinances, with recommended conditions of approval as follows. Consideration be given to citizen concerns over the lighting intensity and/or timing of the video board. Number 2, the signs are accessory to the building and POW MIA Plaza within the downtown mixed-use district, and should either the building or the zoning district change, then the sign would require review and potential removal. Number 3, the proposed signs do not exceed the current proposal of 18 square feet for the POW MIA sponsorship sign and 149 square feet for the existing video board, thus providing sufficient response to the requirements for off-premise signage found in section 4-460.9.2D of the city ordinances. And number 4, a signed conditional use permit agreement is received. I believe the applicant is available to answer any questions.
Tom, you're on mute.
Technology guy that can't run a mouse. There you go. Where was I? Let's see, this is a continued, this was continued from the last meeting. With that, we'll reopen the public hearing portion of this. And I'm wondering if there's any comments from the public. I have read the 2 or 3, was it 3 emails that came in associated with this. They seem to be in line with what the recommendations are at this point, but any other comments from the public? Any comments from the public? Melissa?
I do not see any indication of the public wanting to comment.
Okay, well, if somebody does jump in, Melissa, please let me know.
Okay.
We'll close that for now. Commissioners.
It seems like other people last time knew more about the history of this, so I'm sorry that I'm ignorant. What do we know now that we didn't know last time? What's changed in that proposal? And does that address the concerns that were raised that I wasn't aware of about that the original signage was not to be advertising? If I recall, that was not to be an ad type of billboard. So I need some refreshing from people about what the issues are and if they still remain. I'm not clear.
So the original sign or video board was to be used primarily for events, used as a TV screen. Basically, it wasn't used as a sign for advertisement. It was used for Bison football games, movie night on the plaza, and they indicated they wanted to start using it for individuals that are sponsoring events in the plaza. And they also had a separate application for a sponsorship sign for Choice Bank, which was, if you recall, in the elevations. Previously, it was located a bit further to the west. The rendering shows it closer to the video board, so it appears it's incorporated into that. In case there were concerns with two separate signs, they've indicated in their letter what they're planning to use the sign for, and they've indicated the hours of operation. At the last meeting, they were asked to provide how they were going to use the sign, and so they submitted that letter.
There was a little bit of discussion last time about the viewing of the sign or the distance of the new sign from the street. Do we know, you know, there's what I'm seeing in the photo, there's two options. It looks like they haven't determined exactly which one they want, the left or the right. Is the right one preferable from the aspect of it gets it farther from the street, I guess is my question.
I think if I could weigh in, the applicant is willing to move it around. I think when we talked to them, our thought was, can it be on top or below and be altered, changed so it almost incorporates itself as part of the video board, so it's part of the sign. So essentially something on the bottom that would say sponsored by Choice Financial, you know. And I don't know if they're still able or willing to do that. When you look at the video board, it appears there's not a lot of room to do that. So I think that they would have to do a little something different with that sign if they were to incorporate it into the video board. But I also think that they are willing to move it to another place within the plaza too. But I can't speak for them, and if they want to weigh in right now, they sure this is their opportunity to do so. When we talked about impact to the neighborhood, we asked for them to propose a timing, and they proposed 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. When we dealt with the Cheyenne 32 sign, we talked a lot about lighting intensity. And so I would probably like to see we incorporate something similar to that. And I don't know if they have the same vendor for this sign as they did with that sign. So if they could speak to that, that would probably be helpful. But as it pertains to what West Fargo Events does and who manages the sign, they answered that. I instructed them, and I would instruct the Planning Commission to avoid any discussion on what is actually on the sign, to avoid any concerns with our limiting free speech. It's really, is it an off-premise or is it an on-premise? And that's really the only extent of the discussion towards speech that I would caution the Planning Commission to avoid. So.
Does anybody from the applicant want to comment on any of that?
This is Mike Amundson. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to address the commission today. West Fargo Events is certainly willing to work within whatever parameters we are given by the city of West Fargo. And we're simply trying to come up with solutions to be able to remedy some of the situations that were discussed at the last meeting. And I did do a site inspection with Indigo Signs. There are windows on the top and bottom, but not on the left or right side of the current sign in question. So that's where we came up with those two options. to remedy the issue of 250 feet between signs. We were trying to make it into, more one contiguous location that we're trying to get approved. As for any neighborhood concerns, we are certainly interested in being good stewards of not only our partnerships, but also being a part of that neighborhood downtown. And so we will do what's right to operate within the parameters that we are given. Indigo is not involved on the actual video portion of the sign, and we do have a different vendor than the Cheyenne 32 sign that was discussed. But we could work out some sort of electronic eye or something like that to watch it, similar to what we do here in the southern mixed use district. So we're open to whatever parameters need to be put around us for that.
So it's possible then that you still might be considering doing something on the right or the left side to incorporate it, as Tim was saying that it might be possible to do a sponsorship indicator along with the original video board. Is that an option here for consideration?
We don't have the ability to split that screen, so we were hoping to add that panel onto the screen,
right,
as a physical mounting onto it.
So it would essentially be one display, but
Well,
mounting on it.
okay, I'm gonna be that guy just for a minute. So basically what you're saying is if you're gonna show a NDSU football game on this thing, you're gonna have a big advertisement beside it that says sponsored by Choice Financial. If you're gonna have a community event, you're gonna have this big sign that says sponsored by Choice Financial, or whoever gives you the money for the sponsorship, right? I have a personal opinion on this. I think it looks quite good today. I don't necessarily know from my eye that it looks great with another sign there. That's just my personal opinion. It would seem to me as though there would be the ability to incorporate, and maybe this is the way, maybe this can't be done, Tim, with the way that big video board is put in there. Are we limiting off-premise signage on that video board?
Their request is to allow that video board to be an off-premise sign.
Well, no, I'm talking about the existing one, not the new one.
This is the existing one.
That's what I'm saying. So they are asking for that to be an off-premise as well?
Yeah.
So why do we need more panels? That's my question.
They want a permanent sign that recognizes their sponsor. The problem with their previous placement was that technically, if you read the way the sign code is written, as you discussed at the last meeting, it is less than 250 feet apart. When we looked at it initially, we thought, well, potentially it's small enough that it can't be visible from Cheyenne Street, but the Planning Commission determined that it really could be, and they should look for different placement. And so that's why they were trying to place it right next to this. I had hoped that Indigo could come up with something that would make it sort of integrate better into the existing video board, but they haven't really provided that yet. As you can see on.
This is Joe Cole, but it's really two things. It's the addition of that sign, and it's changing that large screen, which we originally limited to on-premise activities, basically, and going to off-premise advertising.
Well, just one minor correction, Commissioner Cole. We've actually never permitted this video board as a sign. It was installed as a video board to simply show.
Right. Maybe I'm phrasing it wrong. It's now being converted to a sign.
That's what you're asking, yes.
So it's not just a little sign that would be allowing. It's changing this event TV to a sign.
Correct. If it's any consolation, the big sign down on 32nd, to me, I don't know if anybody else has heard of any complaints, but I haven't noticed that to be painfully obtrusive to anybody.
Does the sign on 32nd have advertisements on it yet?
Oh yeah.
Yes. And related to the Cheyenne 32 sign, I'm hoping for a small report on that. There was one given to our city commission. We didn't add anything to the packet tonight, but they are available to give a report on that tonight, or we could have a more formal report at the next meeting, as was requested in the approval of that.
So I'm game for what everybody else thinks. I don't drive by this one all the time. I'm just telling you the one on 32nd isn't, in my opinion, anywhere. It's not a challenge.
So essentially, is this a fundraising program for the West Fargo event planning? I'm sorry, I don't know the official name here, because this is a City of West Fargo Plaza. This has been turned over to the event planning arm, and so they're going to raise money by selling ads, and yet call it a sponsorship. I'm confused. Advertising is a private, for-profit kind of endeavor, and yet then the second one is the sponsorship, which is a philanthropic contribution. I'm seeing a kind of mixture here that I'm having trouble sorting through. And in terms, Tim, of your point about free speech, I get that, but this is a City of West Fargo. This is not, I mean, whose speech is it that is being allowed here? Is it whoever pays money to have an ad on it? And then the City of West Fargo gets that money, or the event planning group gets that money? Plus they get money for sponsorships. Help me.
So please accept my apologies before I say this.
Okay.
The Planning Commission really needs to focus on the fact that this is off-premise or on-premise. Where the money goes, I know it feels uncomfortable to not have that knowledge, but when we're dealing with signs, it's a very, very complicated and very precedent-setting thing. So I will field calls from Newman Signs and other sign companies on why this is allowed versus why one other isn't allowed. Mm-hmm. I really can't have, we as a city, we can't weigh where the money goes on how we determine whether or not we approve this sign. Whether or not we approve this sign should be based upon the conditions of where it is, how big it is, its impact to the neighboring community, the vision of the city, things like that. The applicant is West Fargo Events. West Fargo Events is a group that city has 2 commissioners on, and they use sponsorship to help fund activities within this within the plaza here. But that's about as far as I want to take that. And I can see John unmuted himself, so he's probably telling me to shut up soon.
Yeah, I just wanted to add in that when it comes to reviewing sign issues, there's really 2 guiding principles. You look at whether it's commercial or political speech. Here it's commercial. And while we can regulate some commercial speech, you really, as a planning commission, can't take into account where the money is going because it may or may not be a good cause. It could be a church, or it could be a group that nobody likes. And that's irrelevant. And if you consider that, you can get a First Amendment claim against you. And the other is you really can't look really at the content of it. It's either it's either commercial or it's not commercial. That's really where you draw the line. So you have to look at the sign from that standpoint, that does the sign meet the code or doesn't it meet the code? And if the best group in the world, Charity for Kids comes forward and has a great sign idea, you have to look at the sign on its own merits, not on who's presenting it or what the message is.
I think part of what we are maybe struggling with here is it's really two sign applications or two signs in one application. Let me put it that way. You've got the commercial advertising sign, and we've got a second request for I think you would call that an on-premise sign, correct? So you're going to have off-premise advertising on the screen and an on-premise sign for the sponsorship. And I almost think we need to separate that into two conversations and two separate decisions. They're not one
Isn't the bank
sign.
off premise though too, April? The bank who is sponsoring is not on that premise. It's not a bank at that location. They don't even have
Fair
an
enough,
ATM
yep.
there. So I think both are off premise. So it's the question of, before it was just a TV for events, which was how it was originally proposed, and that's how the neighborhood was. Now we're talking about allowing off-premise advertising, period.
Right, fair enough. But it's really two separate signs, not one.
Well,
Yeah, you could split it. You could
it's
certainly split it
an
into two
addition.
motions. Yeah. You could certainly split it into two motions and treat them independently.
I have trouble treating them
yeah.
as one, and I think if we separate them, I would have trouble approving both of them that close together on that site, because then you couldn't say no to a third or a fourth or a fifth on that site.
On the basis that this is probably not the best spot for off-premise advertising, I would move to decline based on that. Off-premise advertising in this location is not consistent with the neighborhood.
Okay, so I want to make sure I heard you right. Is that a motion?
I'd like to place it as a motion unless somebody wants to discuss it further. I don't want to cut anybody off.
I'll second it. We can discuss it.
So it's been moved and seconded to decline the application. At the request of those making the motion, are there any other discussions?
May I just add, as this is Mike Amundson from West Fargo Events. As the applicant, I would just like to add that the application was made because of the creation of the downtown mixed use district and having different capabilities and rules in place for us to abide by. I'm certainly respectful of this commission's authority to allow or not allow the sign changes that we've requested. But that's where our application thought process started, was the creation of the mixed use district.
Thank you.
Yeah, I kind of go with Joe that, when they first put this here, it wasn't going to be for advertising and that kind of stuff. It's just going to be a video board. I mean, it's at the camel's nose under the tent, and now they get, pretty soon we're sitting here with the whole camel and then talking for hours ad nauseum about signs again. But I'm just thinking we deny this and let the commission, if they want to overrule us, they can.
And they might, and that's their right to do that.
Exactly.
Is there any other comments? I will call the question then. It has been moved and seconded to deny the application. All in favor of that signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. That motion passes. All right, next on the agenda is item number 6, which has been withdrawn, so we'll skip that. Item number 7 is a continued, thank you, Mike, by the way, if you already left. Sorry. Item number 7 is continued. It's A20-9. It's a zoning ordinance amendment to review a proposed neighborhood commercial or NC zoning district.
Hey, Mr. Chair, I want to continue that again. We've not had a chance to reach out with this proposed ordinance amendment. I would just pull it, but I do think we'll have a chance here soon to have some more discussions on it before we come before you again.
Sounds good. So anybody got a problem with continuing that? Okay. Item number 8 is correspondence. There must be some or we wouldn't have it on here.
Yeah, we just got I have it in the packet, the last page. Normally I wouldn't bring these before you right away without any comment, but I did have a notification of this, and it was actually, the mail was directed to the Planning Commission. So if there are any comments, I do want to honor the request and provide them to the person sending them. New Star's just got to move a line here for the diversion, the proposed diversion channel. I didn't have any concerns with it because there's really no development pressure here. I just got a comment from Dustin, though, before the meeting, and maybe he wants to weigh in on that, that potentially moving it to the section line would be preferable. I don't know what that might impact them, but we could certainly provide that as a comment if the Planning Commission desires to do so. And Dustin, I'd let him weigh in on that.
Move it to what section line? I may have a comment. And it'll be loud and obnoxious.
I don't know, any section line.
Don't go there.
Dustin, any comment?
Yeah, thank you, commissioners. The general basis of my comment was really, we've dealt with utilities cutting across land and years and years ago when they were here before the development, that they picked a point of less travel and sometimes, as you see here, they diagonally cut across land, or they, move wherever they can get the easement, and that presents a potential headache for future development and potentially hinders the efficient use of land. And so my comment is, hey, can we try to get this along and what may be a future arterial corridor, or pick a more suitable boundary or alignment that again would just help with future development activities. It's not something that we're going to force and require, but I just thought, if anything, if they're asking for comments, that would be my comment is, hey, let's try to get, no different than when a city tries to plan to put in transmission lines, they pick, an arterial corridor is the most common starting point versus let's cut diagonally up across the middle of a section of land and make things difficult in the future, although it could be 50 to 100 years from now, who knows? But at some point, this land might be suitable for development. And I guess I would like to see a gas transmission main located along a section line, or move it up close to the interstate for that matter. So basically just try not to put it right down the middle of undeveloped land.
So is this where the line is today? Is that what we're looking at?
The blue line is the line today.
So it would be notable to me that it is obviously been designed to miss everybody's property, unlike other projects that go on out in this area. Dustin, I don't know what you would propose for section lines here. Is the gold line what they're proposing?
Yes. Where my finger is there, right, Dustin?
Yep, that's what they're proposing, and that's not a bad option. I just figured, again, move it down to that section line. I don't know what street that is, 38th Street. Could it be within 50 feet of that, or within 100 feet of that, which would be.
So which of the people do you want to buy out for that to happen?
Yeah, and that's where, again, we wouldn't force this, but let's just play this out 20 years from now. If someone wants to come in here and develop out here, and it could be 50 years from now. There's a lot of efficiency. If 38th is going to be converted to an arterial roadway at some point in the future, to me, the most common or logical place for transmission lines and large infrastructure would be along that arterial corridor versus a quarter mile north of it.
But isn't that gold line, and that's where the diversion is going to go through? And, you're not going to be able to develop anything outside of this thing. And so really, it's just, the only thing that's really changing is that little spot right there to the east of the diversion. And that's going just south of that development there that's called, what's the name of it again?
Willow Creek.
Wait, Willow Creek, yeah. Yeah, exactly, right there. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's not that it can't develop west of the diversion. It's just, it's not a very attractive location for development, and that you'd have to low-mower that land and bring in the fuel necessary to develop above the floodplain, but it's not that it's not allowed. And so that's why I say long term, at some point in the future, if there is a desire to create another little development out on that west side, it might be nice that a transmission line like this be closer to a section line where it's kind of out of the way of that development potential. But again, I would never recommend the city try to force this or pursue this. They're just asking for comments, and that would be a comment that I would provide. It would just be get close to a section line, because that's traditionally where an arterial roadway is going to be located, and 200 feet of right of way will be set aside someday in the future.
On that same note, Dustin, their letter indicated that they will be removing the portion that is directly in the footprint of the diversion, but the remainder of the pipeline will be capped and left in place, which also could be a hindrance to future development. I don't know. I have no idea how deep or shallow this is, but that should also be a comment that's made back to them.
No, that's a good point.
Well, it's my understanding also that drain, is that drain 41? Is that what that's called out there? It's my understanding that another phase of the diversion is to deepen that thing too. So are they in the know on that, or what's the story on that?
The same letter is likely provided to the Fargo Moorhead Diversion Authority. Our role here is to weigh in on development patterns for the city of West Fargo.
The Cass County Water Resource District received this letter as well, and that it's drain 14, that is this blue dashed line going east-west.
Okay.
Pipeline will cross as well.
Yep. Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I could recommend to the Planning Commission that you direct the city engineer and planning director to provide a written response. If you agree with the comments made by Dustin Scott and then the comments made by April as well, that we would incorporate those into a response letter. I need a motion for that if you want to have that.
Does anybody want to make a motion to that effect?
I'd make that motion.
Seconded, Joe.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that the city engineer and the Planning and Zoning Commission chair, I think is what you said, draft a letter in response to this, taking into account the comments that we've made thus far on this proposal. Is that what I heard?
I said director just to let you have staff do it unless you want to.
No, I don't. I would rather have input than be the one writing it. That the director of planning and the city engineer draft a letter of response using the comments that we've had thus far as an official response. Correct? Is that right?
Yep.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, the same sign? Motion passed.
Thank you.
I would encourage you, just as a side note, to not only consider section lines, you could also consider half section lines and get the same effect without affecting any existing dwellings at this point. So just
Yeah, I agree with that.
all right. Next item is, I don't remember what number it is. Well, hang on, I can get back there quickly.
Number 9 on agenda.
Next item is number 9, non-agenda. Any?
We are planning to have city commission meeting in person next Monday, so I anticipate our July meeting could be held in person. I would certainly take any emails this week or next or throughout the month if you have major concerns with that. And I can certainly make accommodations if you do not feel comfortable attending an in-person meeting as well.
So I think along those lines, Tim, this mechanism that we've been using, we might want to consider that as a possible option ongoing. Because I know there's sometimes Joe's out of town, sometimes I'm out of town. It doesn't mean we can't attend a meeting. It's just that we're not physically there. So I don't know what the ramifications of that would be, but everybody's out of town from time to time. Sometimes people are just flat on vacation. They don't want to be at a meeting. Sometimes we're just out of town and we can't be in town for it. So, So anyway, just a thought.
Great idea. I'll talk to Melissa and see what we can come up with.
All right. Take a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
I'll second. Rocco.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Motion passed. Dave Gust, hang on a second. We're done with our meeting. I'll call you. I'll just call you.
Okay. All right. That'd be fine.
I got mosquito problems.
The recording has stopped.
Thank you.
Thanks.
See ya.